Now let's turn to 2020. Joe Biden's latest bump in the polls and support from the firefighters unions seem to be getting under the president's skin. Trump insisting this morning that he has done more for firefighters than, quote, the dues-sucking union, and retweeting posts from dozens of firefighters, or at least tweeters posing as firefighters, who say they support him over Biden. But does the president have to have a reason to be worried? How telling is Biden's early lead? Well, guess who's here to tell us? NBC's national political correspondent Steve Kornacki here to break it down. The president, 60 retweets in 18 minutes this morning, most of which were specifically in response to the firefighters' endorsement of Joe Biden. That's got to be getting under the president's skin.
Well, the polls say, at least right now, a long time to go, but that Joe Biden starts out as the front runner on the Democratic side. And again, there were 3 yesterday. Here's one of them that had Biden getting not just a bounce, but a big bounce from his announcement, up near 40%. You see in this one a 24-point lead over his nearest rival, 39%. Now, look, it is very early. It's a giant field. A lot of people can jump up. There's going to be a lot of opportunities for it. Joe Biden has a history. He's not always held up well in presidential races. There's all sorts of reasons to think it's very possible this is going to recede. Somebody else will emerge. Biden won't be the nominee. But I think it's also worth pointing out there are examples where somebody starts out in front, stays in front, and wins the nomination, especially when you're talking about a party that's looking for a challenger against an incumbent president. Let's go back here, sort of modern times. This is going way back, but 1980, Republicans needed a candidate to run against Jimmy Carter. Reagan started out, this is what the poll looked like when he announced his candidacy. Reagan was the nominee. There were some hiccups along the way. He lost Iowa to Bush, but Reagan started out in front, won the nomination. In 84, Democrats needed an opponent against Reagan. Mondale, the former vice president, started out in front. Again, he had some hiccups, but he did win the nomination. 1996, Republicans needed a challenger against Bill Clinton. Bob Dole, the Senate Republican leader, started out in front. He did lose New Hampshire to Pat Buchanan, solidified his campaign after that, won the nomination. 2012, Mitt Romney. There were a lot of hiccups for Mitt Romney. He was a very weak frontrunner. This is where he was in our poll when he announced his campaign in June of 2011, but he did start out in front, and he did win the nomination. So sometimes it happens. Not always. 2004, guess who the early frontrunner was on the Democratic side? It was Joe Lieberman. He'd been the Democratic nominee for vice president in 2000. Of course, John Kerry ended up being the nominee. There was a moment when Howard Dean, he was way at the bottom, surged to frontrunner. It doesn't always happen. And of course, the other example that always haunts every early frontrunner is Rudy Giuliani. You talked about him a minute ago. This was an open seat race in 08, but Giuliani started out near 40%, around where Biden is now. And what happened with Giuliani was nothing, no big major event. He just slowly, steadily faded out. And that's the nightmare scenario for a frontrunner like Biden right now, Stephanie.
Well, I mean, then I hope all of the 2020 candidates are watching. Steve, he's telling you, so you're saying there's a chance. Talk to me about Elizabeth Warren for a moment, because Joe Biden seems to be going off of her script, throwing that red populist meat, telling people at his rally, corporate leaders, CEOs are not beholden to shareholders. That is malarkey. In fact, that's not malarkey. That is the case. It's their legal obligation. But Elizabeth Warren is proposing actual policy to change that. How is she doing in the polls?
Yeah, that's interesting. We'll go back, rewind to the beginning. But Warren, you see it in this poll we put up. This was the CNN poll yesterday. Whoa, I went too far there. Third place here in this poll. You do see, look, she's ahead of Buttigieg by a point in this. And I say there were 3 polls yesterday that came out. What was noteworthy about Warren is she's ahead of Buttigieg in all 3 of those polls now. Hadn't been the case in some polling before this. Another poll yesterday actually had her moving into double digits ahead of Sanders. So you're seeing some movement on Warren's front in these polls. One thing that I think is interesting, if you look, Buttigieg has gotten a lot of attention early on. Warren, unlike Buttigieg in her surge, you're seeing non-white and white support. That indicates to me at least the potential for some growth there for her. We'll see what she does with it.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.